With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome some of the Small Town Monsters crew on with me, Seth Breedlove, Courteney Breedlove, and Heather Moser. We are going to talk about their upcoming films, which of course ties directly into the soon-to-launch Kickstarter. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hey.
Hi.
So, first of all, Seth, 10 years, dude. Congrats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been there since the beginning.
It's pretty crazy.
We were just talking about this the other day on Monsteropolis, is the Finding Bigfoot taping where we all sort of ran into each other in person for the first time. That was all the way back in 2014.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that long ago, but that was a long, long while ago.
Mm-hmm. No, apparently you and Heather met there, and then I can't remember if you and I had met. I don't think we'd met in person before that, but
I don't think so.
Maybe we did. I have no idea.
I don't believe so. I met Heather. I met you. I met Mark. I mean, it was kind of just everybody's thrown into the mix all at once. There was all kind of folks there for that. Yeah. And every once in a while, people still will email and go, "Hey, was it your noggin in the town hall?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know, because they'll like flash us for a second, you know, and I'm like, man, you got some good eyes, because I didn't even watch that back, really. I don't even remember what was doing in that, but every once in a while that occurs, and I'm like, God, that was so long ago.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But yeah, 10 years. I mean, technically 11 is what I keep saying, because we started filming Minerva in July of 2014. But yeah, 2015 would be 10 years since the release of Minerva, because it came out in was it May? When was the Ohio Bigfoot conference? That was April, right?
I think that's usually in April. I'm not sure.
Because we technically the Minerva Monster version that premiered at OBC was not finished. We still did a bunch of work on that after, but I remember that premiere was interesting. You were there for that too.
I was. I love that. And see, I'm sure you've said that before. I'm sure that's just information that has fallen out of my head, that wasn't actually finished at that time. It sure seemed finished to me. I love that film. And you've been critical of that film, which it's your first, so I imagine you would have criticisms of it. Have you ever thought of, I don't even know if this is a possibility, but going back and having like a redo or a sequels?
That's the 2025. That was the dream project for the year. But our problem is Howie Caton just doesn't. He's already said his piece, and he doesn't feel like he needs to go back into it. And I feel like if we don't have Howie, I don't think we really have a movie, frankly. So without him being involved, it'd be kind of pointless, I think. But I mean, the dream would be to go back and do it, because there's just so much that got left out of the final film that is important to that story. You know, I think the biggest thing is just like the ongoing activity after the 78 stuff. There was a lot from 78 that we didn't get into as well, like, you know, the UFO landing across the street from the Caton's house, and like the disappearing caves that were supposedly behind the house that the Catons would see. There were multiple accounts that came to us after the movie was done from neighbors and people that lived around Minerva. One of my favorite stories that was like tied to the Minerva story was this. I think this was a Saswat email. So I think someone sent Mark and I an email to the podcast we were doing at the time, and it was from someone who had stopped at a garage sale that was taking place at the next door neighbors to the Caton's house. They were holding a garage sale, and this guy said And I have no way of verifying this anymore because I don't think the same people live at the house next door. But he claimed he went to the house and bought a tackle box. He took it out to his car and threw it in his car, and I can't remember the sequence of events here, but at some point he opened this tackle box or no, he didn't. Okay, now I remember. Okay, so he takes this tackle box to the car, and all of a sudden the guy that just sold it to him comes running out after him. And he's like, "Hey, hold on a second. There's something in that box I need." And he opened the box, this tackle box, and taped to the inside of the tackle box was a photo of like a caveman. And he said it looked like it was clearly like a real photo, and that you could see the facial features of this creature, and it was supposedly the Minerva monster, and somehow this neighbor had like a very clear photo of it. And I always thought that was really interesting. I have no way of verifying it. And the Catons also have photos of, stuff. They've got photos that they've never put out there because they don't believe they don't think anyone's going to believe them after their experience in the 70s, which is understandable. But I love that caveman story.
In regards to the UFO and the disappearing cave situation, was that a choice that like Howie was like, listen, the Bigfoot is enough for me to come out with and talk about? Like, I'm not going to touch that, or was it whose decision was that?
Howie was not shy. None of the family was shy about talking about the weirder aspects of that case. I think there was a conscious decision on our part to focus on just sort of the ins and outs of the main Bigfoot events, because we didn't know how far off the beaten path we could get into, the weeds of like high strangeness without alienating the audience. Because I mean, this is 2015. Bigfoot was still very much, just the weirder aspects of the phenomenon were not on display anywhere at that point in time. I mean, if you think back to 2015, the only television shows were Mountain Monsters and Finding Bigfoot, and Mysteries and Monsters in America would pop up every now and then. But there really wasn't anything that really got into the high strangeness parts of some Bigfoot cases. So we just stopped at, like, let's focus on the Bigfoot stuff, get that done. Also, Howie didn't talk a ton about that stuff until later. So there were multiple occasions where we hung out with Howie and some of the Cadence after the movie had come out, including once the movie had been edited, we took a cut to the Caton's house and showed it to them, and then we ended up in the woods afterward. But yeah, it was just a decision to keep it focused on the Bigfoot stuff, but there was a lot more than just disappearing caves and UFO sightings. There was, like I said, there were multiple events that happened after the 70s and I mean, up to present day. They still claim activity back there. We've talked about it. I think Brandon Dalo maybe told this story once somewhere, but there was apparently an incident where the family would go. So the family wasn't like afraid of this Sasquatch or anything, the Minerva monster. They were not afraid of it. But if they felt that there were very clear warnings given by the Bigfoots to not go into the forest after dark. And there was one occasion where they were way back over by the strip pond, I believe it was, and they were hiking out. I think they were heading back to the house, and supposedly this Bigfoot swung down from a tree somehow, grabbed Howie, and like launched him into the air. And I mean, it's one of those like really over the top stories that sounds almost like the one that they tell in Minerva Monster about the Bigfoot jumping on them and they're wrestling it and all that stuff. This story is similar to that, and it's also similar in the fact that every member of the family that was there verified the story. They said they watched a Bigfoot swing down, grab Howie, and throw him. So there's so many little anecdotes like that I've probably forgotten, so just because it was however many 10 years since we shot it. But there were all sorts of stories like that we wanted to get into that just didn't happen. And then, if you rope that into or tie it to the stuff that we did out at Heather's property, I mean, Heather's property is not super close to the Caton's house, but it's close enough that I think all the history of Minerva should be taken into account when you're considering, the activity out at Heather's or the Caton property. I mean, there's historical reports around that region that go all the way back to the 1800s. So there's definitely something there, and there's still story to tell with the Minerva movie. I just don't know that we'll ever get to do it because I just don't see the point if you can't have the original witnesses kind of telling it. We could probably have done and we still might do something similar to this, but we probably could have done something, with narration to help fill in some of the dots. But the other problem is that I don't own the footage, or I probably do own the footage. Technically, I own it, but I don't have the footage from Minerva Monster. That's with the original producers. So there's more in that footage that should have been put out than ever was.
Now, you say the current reports, are those, are you talking about everything, lights, UFOs, Bigfoot, or is it mostly Bigfoot stuff that's going on that you're hearing about?
I don't know. Heather probably knows more than me, but with what I hear the most about out that way is Bigfoot. I don't hear a lot of UFO stuff or, other reports tied to high strangeness. I've never been told a Dogman story or anything like that out there. The most common non-Bigfoot reports you hear from Minerva area, and again, I think Heather can fill in some blanks here too, but I hear a lot about mystery lights like orbs, and I hear a lot about Bigfoot, and then the mystery cats. Those are UFO stuff. I don't know. Maybe there is, and I just don't hear about it.
Heather, did you want to add anything in there?
Well, as long as my internet will hold up, yeah. I have heard UFO reports. My uncle apparently saw one just not far from Minerva. It's just right outside of Carrollton. Other than that, it is the mystery lights that you hear about more often than anything, aside from Bigfoot, of course.
I mean, we experienced the mystery lights when we were filming
Bigfoot Project.
Yeah, when we were filming the Bigfoot Project, we had multiple experiences on Heather's property with weird lights in the woods, and
chasing stuff up and down hills that you could just never get to.
And the weirdest was when we had Alex at the property, and it was very cold. It was middle of winter. I want to say it was like February. It was really cold, and we were hiking up the hill behind the cabin, which is, I think it was the hill behind the cabin. It might have been. And we were hiking up. It was nighttime, and when we got up to the top of the hill, you could see across to the other hill through the forest where my car was parked. My car was parked on the side of the hill over by the Rougarou Woods. And when we got up to the top, we saw lights, or a light, like a white light, moving around my Jeep. And I was like, I think there's someone trying to get into my Jeep. And so we ended up essentially running all the way back down the hill, back up the trail, all the way back around to where my car was parked. And when we got there, there was no one at the car. And also there were no fresh footprints in the snow by my car.
But didn't someone down the hill still see the light once we were up there?
No. I think no, that didn't happen. But the light, there was definitely a light at the car. There was also an incident where we chased a light, like a white light, through the woods near the cabin that had just sort of appeared in the woods. And that was the same night. We had Les Odell out there that night, and Les had seen I think it was like a red light in the top of a tree outside of the cabin, and that tree was extremely tall. So he was seeing this light probably 40, 50 feet up in this tree. So we had mystery light experiences out there too. I don't know, my personal opinion is those are not necessarily tied to the Sasquatches, but there's a lot of those mystery light reports out, out in Minerva.
What is this Rougarou Woods moniker? Is that something you guys came up with?
Yeah, that's where we filmed the recreations for Rougarou.
That's why we call it that.
Gotcha.
That's also where Heather
Some of them anyway.
Yeah. And that's where Heather was putting, like, she was doing gifting out there when I started going out, which is something I've never put a lot of stock in, but she was having some really weird things happen on the property with gifting where she was like leaving crystals or whatever, and the weirdest one was she had put a crystal out there that had been taken and then replaced with a squirrel skull, which was
It was a deer vertebrae, but yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I tell that story wrong all the time then.
Those are also the woods where there's some stuff that people have discarded there, and things bang on like these giant plastic barrels that are stored there and stuff. So there's a lot of odd sounds and happenings that happen in that patch of woods in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did Heather ever, Seth, this is for you, did she ever ask you to try the Estes method out there that she has done?
No.
Are you going to try that?
She would not put me in that position. I'm fairly confident.
Correct. I would never suggest that.
You cough it out like Estes method. Just be like, oh no, it was a cough. It was something in my throat. Like I wasn't suggesting,
The weirdest thing I did out there was call blast some Gregorian chants, which is something that Daryl Collier did in Area X back in 2018 when I was in there with him. And I thought it was such a weird thing to do, but that night we had activity. So I was like, maybe I'll duplicate that. But we didn't have, I don't think we had any activity the night I did it, but I played some chants on like a Bluetooth speaker for a little while. I also did the thing where I call blasted like baby crying sounds. And
you did the Ohio howl, I think.
The Ohio howl, stuff like that. But we just didn't hear a lot of vocalizations out there.
We heard that one whoop.
There was one whoop, but that was it. Other than that, it was all wood knocks. There were so many wood knocks out there.
Stones being thrown.
Rocks being thrown. There was a night where, so this happened on a few occasions where we would stay in the hunting cabin that's on the property, and I would hear this sound outside the wall that sounded like asthmatic breathing. It's kind of like this heavy, raspy breathing. And I thought that was really weird. And then one night, Tommy and I were sleeping in there. And Tommy at the time was probably only 3 or 4. Well, I guess he would have been 4. And him and I were asleep in the cabin. And it was just us. We were staying out there alone that night. And, and just to set the stage as far as what that room looks like where you sleep, it's like a narrow room with, and they've changed it since, but at the time it was just kind of a big queen-sized plywood sheet, held up by 2x4s or something. And there was a window right next to the head of the bed. So like you would be laying there and there was a drape over the window, but it wasn't much of a drape. And so it was kind of unsettling anytime you were in there because you were always like, well, these things, we've heard them approach the cabin. So you know that they're checking us out. And at night, some nights I can remember I'd wake up and be like, man, there could be one of these things outside that window right now. But there was this one night where Tommy and I were sleeping in there and I heard that raspy, asthmatic kind of breathing on the other side of the wall. And it creeped me out enough just because Tommy was there with me. If I was alone, I usually stuff didn't really, creep me out there. But there was that incident creeped me out just because of the breathing. And then there was an incident that's on camera, and it's in one of the episodes of Bigfoot Project. But we had been, and this happened multiple times, but this one time it happened to actually catch it on camera. We were we were sleeping in the cabin, and this like kind of I don't even mechanical rumble started, and it started maybe around like midnight and ran until 5 a.m. and I could not. It was loud enough that it was shaking the windows in the cabin, and we never did figure out what that was, but that happened on multiple occasions. And people were like, well, there's a big power line that runs through there. It's the power line. It wasn't the power line. Like I'm very, you could hear the power line if you walked out to the power line. This was like almost like a train was running through the property underground or something. That's kind of what it sounded like. We experienced that a couple times too, along with it. And I mean, the most unnerving thing I ever had happen was something that I found out about after the fact. And that was one night where I left an audio recorder on the porch of the cabin, the hunting cabin. And Heather and I would like take turns kind of reviewing audio from out there. And we had so much audio that I don't think we ever have gone through all of it. But one of us was going through the recorder audio and found a point during the middle of the night, because I would leave a recorder sitting on the porch. But there was a point where during the middle of a night, something came up the steps of the cabin and then never left. Like you heard, I mean, you could go through the whole sequence of events. You hear me saying, we're going to bed, blah, 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 shut the door. And then you hear, sometime in the middle of the night, there hasn't been a sound in like 2 hours. You hear whatever it is bipedally approach the cabin, walk through the leaves and the grass, come up the steps, and then you can kind of hear the porch creak every now and then. So it's still obviously on the porch, but I never could find a timestamp where it left the porch. And the weird thing about that is, like when you're listening back, it could be anything. You're like, well, maybe that's like me. Maybe I walked off and I came back up and I just, but you never hear the door open or anything. And it's very obvious when the door to the cabin opens. So this is some unknown being just hanging out on the porch of the cabin while we're asleep inside. And that always unsettled me.
Yeah, that would be a little bit creepy, especially not knowing until after. Maybe it was good that you didn't know till after. You'd be like, time to ixnay this little project at this time.
Yeah.
The raspiness outside with Tommy, did you, of course, check around? Was there anything weird outside that next day?
There was nothing outside next day. We only found, the only evidence we ever found would have been what we think was we had this one night where it was Mark Matsky and I had stayed out at the cabin, and we were sitting on the porch of the cabin, and we kept hearing these weird not vocalizations. It was almost like humming, and it was coming across from the cabin there's like a pond, or you could call it like a real small lake, but it's mostly a pond, right outside the front door of the cabin. And on the other side of that is a hill, and we were hearing this kind of like melodic humming, and it was creepy, but not creepy enough that, like we thought it could have been an animal still. But at some point it sounded like something smashed whatever was making that sound. Like you heard this thump, and there was a real soft yelp, and then it was just gone the rest of the night. So the next morning, Mark and I got up and we went over there to the area where we had heard the sounds, and there was an impression in the ground, and it was pretty big. It was Heather, Mark, and I were the ones that found it, and we casted it. It was my first time casting it. It was in very wet ground, and it was on the side of a hill, so it was hard to cast. So, like when we were looking at it in person, you could see the toe indentations and everything, but when we casted it, it was not a very good mold. I mean, you couldn't make out those details that we could in person, or even that you can make out in the photos I took of the track before we poured the plaster in. But that was, yeah.
That was just Heather out there trying to get back at you for not being open-minded enough to try the Estes method. I know that. So, and this is just a cursory search that I should have done. I didn't really know any of this was going to come up, but, and I don't know much about the Estes method beyond what Heather has told me. She and Jen came on for a really in-depth conversation about some things that were going on her property. But now I'm seeing the stuff with this psionics, with essentially calling UFOs. And to add to that, I don't know how that differs from CE5. I guess, well, we've seen that in action, so maybe I can, there's my answer. But I'm wondering what the difference is, and maybe Heather knows. What's the difference between doing something like the Estes method and doing this psionic new calling UFOs thing? It's all tied into consciousness somehow, right?
Yeah, from what I understand, but I haven't done anything with like C5 or the psionics. From what I understand, it's just like that. It's just like the Estes method, but for UFOs.
I've been around someone doing the CE5 stuff, and they did. I mean, this was back in. Well, Heather, you've been, or not Heather, but Shannon, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
The the incident with Jason.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, that lady in New Hampshire was doing the CE5 stuff, and
Yeah.
we see something in the sky that night. Maybe
We did. It was just, it was quite far, but all of us did see something, but it's so difficult to, I mean, there's so many things in the sky anymore, but there was something that happened after all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I personally, everything I experienced out there when it relates to Bigfoot seemed very much like traditional flesh and blood Bigfoot stuff. The other activity occurring, first of all, it was not common for and in fact, like the mystery lights and stuff didn't show up till way late in the game. Like we were into the winter before that started happening. The the sounds and the like, that mechanical rumble and everything, that could have been something. There's probably a prosaic explanation for that I just haven't figured out yet.
I mean, there could be, but that does tie in with other reports. Like even Martin's story has got, these metallic sounds that just shouldn't be out where people are, that are really strange. So that it does track with other stories and encounters.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was weird. I mean, the weirdest thing about it too was how long it lasted, that rumble, because it lasted for hours and hours.
Did it ever wane? Like, was it undulating as far as the
It was steady that night.
That is weird.
It was steady. What was weird, if I remember right, I mean, it's been a while, but if I remember right, it was heavier for a couple hours, and then it did maybe die down a little bit for the remaining few hours, but it was not like an up and down undulating kind of thing. It was pretty steady at the volume it was going. And it was, like I said, what was really odd about it was that it was shaking the windows on the cabin. I mean, it would be like if someone in a semi had pulled up outside the cabin,
Right, and it's just sitting idle outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
Is the Bigfoot project all on your YouTube squad side of things?
It's ad
free for Squad, but it's available with ads for everyone
for
free
on YouTube. And we're in the process of distributing that one to other platforms too, so it should be up on Tubi and things like that pretty soon.
And Seth, is one of the Bigfoot Project episodes, is that where, how much do you talk about, like when you almost broke both your legs jumping off of a Can-Am after you saw the footy out there? I mean, do you get into that very much, or do you try to stay?
Well, we were filming when it happened, so it's in the first episode is that would be, we were out trying to hang trail cameras on the property, and that was when I saw the dark brown individual run across the hill near the pipeline that runs through the property. What's funny is we were out yesterday with Mark DeWorth down in Coshocton in the Wills Creek area, at his sighting location. And Shannon, have you ever heard his sighting story?
A long time ago, I have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how similar aspects of his story are to mine, just because like his sighting happened during the middle of the day, like a bright, and then the way it moved when he saw it running away from him up this hill, and the way he described the movement reminded me of what I saw, because what I saw was like an arm pumping, legs moving as this thing ran into the woods. I mean, I also only had eyes on the one I saw for like less than a second, but I know it was dark brown and what I took to be fur. But what Mark was saying yesterday is that maybe it had longer hair, but at the distance I was looking at it just looked like fur. Because I've always, you always hear that these things have like long stringy hair, but what I saw seemed to be like fur. And but Mark said maybe at the distance you were looking, maybe everything just seemed like fur. So I thought that seemed plausible. But that was, yeah, mine happened at like 2 p.m. on a summer day, perfectly clear blue sky.
Well, and we were driving in a gator, a motorized little farm vehicle that was making noise because we were rumbling along. But I was filming him, so him and Corey were talking, and I'm standing in the back filming him, and the next thing I know, he's yelling to stop, and he's jumping out of the gator before it's even stopped on this incline, running toward this high brush and this pipeline to try and go after something that I couldn't see.
Yeah. And the downside to that experience was not the experience of seeing it, but just kind of realizing the realistic version of the reality of trying to document something like this on the level we were trying to do it. Because the show was, the original idea was that was going to be an ongoing show and stuff, but we realized by like the late fall that activity was dying down, and by February there was very little happening, if anything, on the property. And it was like, I don't know how to keep filming. I don't know how to keep filming a show where nothing is going to happen. But I just think there's so much that happened around that property at that time. And, Heather will still update me on like what's going on out there. But I know that they did all this construction work or clear cutting on the neighboring property to put in like an ATV course or a four-wheeler course or something, a dirt bike track. I can't remember what it was. Heather would be able to correct me. But once they started doing that, it really seemed like these things moved out. And, by the spring, there was no activity out there. I mean, but there is the fact that, in Minerva, there's a very specific period of time where these things tend to be seen, like the Catons all the activity, not all the activity, but the main chunk of activity that took place on the Catons house in 78 was between August and October, and the same, or July and October. And the same thing holds true for ongoing activity, that would always kind of fall between late July, late September. And then we started filming Bigfoot Project in early September, and that activity continued, pretty heavily into early to mid October, but then it just died down. And I think it's part of that is, you're out on it's patchy farmland with not a lot of forest, and what forest there is, it's not super dense. Tons of undergrowth and places to hide, but it's not a very big chunk of forest. So there just might not be enough land out there for them to stay hidden in during, once the leaf canopy falls, so they just slink back into the shadows of some of the denser parts of the forest that are nearby. And Cliff always used to tell me, don't give up on like a location just because activity stops for a period of time doesn't mean it's done. They more than likely will end up back in that place at some point. So I'm hoping at some point they end up back in that place and we get lucky enough to be there, when they make their return.
Heather, have you noticed any activity lately that seems strange out of doors?
So this summer there was a little bit of activity, but not enough for me to tell Seth to out, and I would actually play the Ohio Howl, and sometimes we would get responses in that, not like Howl's back or anything, but we would get rocks being thrown into the pond. And then the one time Seth came out to film, he was filming after he left, one of my crystals had been moved onto the path that he had walked. But beyond that, there.
Yeah, hopefully things kick back up again for you guys, because that's a no-brainer when somebody actually just owns a property you can just go out onto anytime.
Well,
I mean, compared to Area X where you have to, I mean, it's a process, right, to get out there beyond just the travel to get there. It's a whole other thing. So that would be amazing to have that kick back up again.
yeah, and I think, I mean, we're gonna do a follow up to Bigfoot Project later this year, probably in the summer, and it's gonna be we're gonna still Heather's property will still be involved, but there are so many places in Ohio that are similar to that, you know, like
That aren't far from us
that
either.
aren't far from us. Yeah, so I think when I mean, even by April of that year when we were filming Bigfoot Project, we had Cliff out here, and he stayed with me at the cabin, and we ended up going out to Leesville Lake, Heather and Cliff and I, and we got out of the car, walked 100, 200 yards into the woods and recorded a call, like a very clear, what sounded to me very much like a very odd vocalization. And that's within 20 minutes of Heather's property. So, you know, around that area, there are plenty of places where we can go to film and hopefully continue to kind of document, you know, the activity around that particular area. The history in Ohio is so rich with these types of events, and there's so many locations like Minerva, you know, like places where there's a long history of sightings where you can go, you're walking on hallowed ground. Like if you're a Bigfoot nerd like I am, like yesterday was super cool for me to go down to like Wills Creek and walk around Woodbury and all that, because that's where Don Keating shot his White Bigfoot video. And it turned out Courtney and I were at the lake where he had shot the White Bigfoot video, and we didn't even realize it. And I just think there's a ton of locations in Ohio that are underexplored, and we're extremely lucky to be able to just go visit those places.
So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Kickstarter. It will launch February 6th. And we've got 4 films in this one. We've got Dawn of the Dogman, The Siege of Ape Canyon, The Kinderhook Creature, and then From the Beyond, High Strangeness in the Bennington Triangle. And I'm not going to expect you guys to, you know, regale us with tales from each one, but I mean, is there a favorite that maybe you could share a couple of the encounters or stories that you know will be in some of these films?
Well, I mean, Ape Canyon is sort of the most well-known, I think, of the stories that we're covering, and that's obviously probably one of the best known Sasquatch stories there is. And that one has already been filmed. The exciting thing about that one is that Eli was the first film crew to get to shoot there, one of the first film crews to get to film there. So, you know, for audiences, they'll actually get to see the location of the Fred Beck Ape Canyon siege in that movie. And the movie also takes like a really in-depth look at the work Mark Marcel has put into, you know, locating that place and preserving it and trying to do as much as he can to sort of archaeologically approach the Ape Canyon. So my first movie is going to be Dawn of the Dogman, which is like a spiritual sequel to the Bray Road Beast, and I'm actually very excited about one aspect of this movie in particular, which is that, you know, Linda Godfrey's interview for Bray Road Beast was nearly 2 hours long, and you know, even in a feature-length movie like Bray Road, she's the main character of that movie. She still only was on screen for probably like 20, 25 minutes. So we have a ton of her interview to use. And there's one story in particular that she told about her own Dogman experience, which took place when she was on a film shoot, a television show shoot in Michigan, where she feels like there were actually dogmen like approaching her during the film shoot. And Heather has gone through that transcription lately, so Heather might be able to fill in the details a little bit there. But I'm excited about that film just because that isn't a story that's super well known outside of the podcast circuit. Like, I'm not sure how much Linda had talked about that event, and she passed away a couple of years after. So it's Dawn of the Dogman's exciting just because I think it'll do a lot to help preserve Linda's legacy, and it'll be cool to get to use aspects of that interview that I don't think have been out there. So there's that, and then Kinderhook Creature. We've delved into the Kinderhook Creature twice now. It's mentioned in Beast of Whitehall, and then we interviewed Bruce Hallenbeck and some of his family during the filming of On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey. And for that's like what we've been talking about with Minerva. The Kinderhook story is really similar to that because you have this property where the Hallenbecks lived that is surrounded by some, kind of dense woods, but also some patchy farmland. And there's this history of sightings there that go back, over 100 years. There was this creature called the Kinderhook Blob. And that was not at all like a Bigfoot type creature. It's more like a Mothman, really odd, bizarre being that was said to roam the woods around Kinderhook, New York. But then in the 60s and 70s, there started being frequent sightings of like Sasquatch type creatures. And Bruce and his family started to have encounters on the property with these things, including recording sounds on the property, vocalizations that sound kind of like kids yelling or screaming in the woods, which is super creepy. But that'll be, just from like a creative standpoint, I'm excited for that one because that kind of takes us back to the small, like intimate kind of Bigfoot sighting story that we covered with Minerva or Beast of Whitehall. And so plus the Kinderhook story just in general, I've wanted to really delve deep into that for a long time because there's so much more to it than just Sasquatch, like a Sasquatch story. There's mystery lights and UFO sightings and the blob, and there's probably more involved there. That one is, I think, going to be very exciting to get into. And then the Bennington Triangle is the one I know the least about right now, and this is because, it's intentionally not something that I've spent a ton of time researching, mostly because I'm kind of excited to learn about that as we make the movie. But the thing I've always heard about, the first time I heard about the Bennington Triangle was when we were filming Beast of Whitehall, and Paul Bartholomew told me, you guys should do something about Bennington. And I was like, what is the Bennington Triangle? And he told me that it's this area that's really similar to the Chestnut Ridge or like Skinwalker Ranch. It's like a portal area, high strangeness window area, whatever you want to call it, where, going back hundreds of years, there's been a lot of really weird activity. And there's mystery lights and UFO sightings, tons of Bigfoot activity. The story that he told me, though, to sort of introduce me to the concept of the Bennington Triangle, was a story about two police officers that saw this pterodactyl somewhere near the big Bennington Triangle or inside the Bennington Triangle, and they hadn't reported it. I believe they had told the story to like a local Bigfoot researcher, and Paul had told me that story all the way back in 2016 or 2015 when we were making Beast of Whitehall. And so that was the first time I was like, maybe we could do something, about that area, because I love those stories that are expansive like that, like Chestnut Ridge or Skinwalker, where there's so many accounts of so many different types of phenomena that it almost is like making an anthology film. So yeah, that's my rundown.
Seth, are you directing the Bennington Triangle film?
Yeah, the only one I'm not doing is Ape Canyon. Ape Canyon is Eli's, and that was shot last summer. But I'm doing the Dawn of the Dogman, Kinderhook, and Bennington are all mine.
I don't know if you can share this or not, but is the area, the actual area of Ape Canyon in which Mark has found, is it on public land? Is it in a national park? Where is it?
It's inside a national park.
Oh,
It's right at Mount St. Helens.
From what I understand, extremely hazardous to get to. Like the
Yeah.
boys had to have climbing gear and helmets.
ugh.
Yeah, there was, and they were in there with a pretty big, group of people when they went. But there was, it's a pretty, yeah, hazardous would be a good way to put it. The email, I mean, I wasn't going, but I was a part of the email chains that were detailing like how they were going to handle safety and stuff. And it was, I mean, they took it extremely seriously, and it was not without its share of trials and tribulations getting down in there.
God bless anyone that goes in caves or goes rock climbing to where you have to use ropes and all the carabiners and stuff. I'm out. I'm just, I'd rather go in a cave than do the rock climbing. That's it. Nope, not doing it. So God
Yeah.
bless them. How many people actually physically, I mean, and they're carrying all that gear. That's insane. How many
Well,
people actually went there?
Well,
the,
Alex was there too, so there's basically two crews there.
yeah, that's what I was. There were essentially two crews, and they did not all go down into Ape Canyon at the same time because it's not a very large area, and Eli wanted to be able to get footage without people walking all over everything. But I would say, uh, what was it, like 8 to 10 people were in
It
there?
was 10 or less, basically on episodic content and then the film content side, and they took turns and helped looked after each other, obviously, because they were each other's rescue crew if something happened.
What is there any remnants at all? Old rusty nails, anything like that? That there actually was a cabin down there?
Yeah,
There's
yeah, for
stuff
sure.
there that they filmed.
That's how Mark had actually figured out that this was the location, I believe. As far as like how much has been recovered or what they're trying to recover, or even if they're legally allowed to recover anything, since it's on,
Right.
since it's in a national park, I'm not positive about any of that. I just know that getting down to the actual site itself is a multi-day event. It's not something you can just walk in there and go see it.
Yeah, if you're going in, you're camping.
Yeah.
So you got to plan on multiple days in the woods and have gear for that you're going to carry.
But I mean, that's a crazy area because I mean, this has been fresh in my memory because Mark and I filmed Mark Marcel with Mount St. Helens as the backdrop back in 2018 when we were shooting on the Trail of Bigfoot, the first series. And the lore surrounding Sasquatch in that particular place is so rich that it's kind of on another level from almost any other place I've been because so much of it is historical. Like when you get there, one of the first things you see is the sign that says like Ape Cave. And then there's all, then there's all these stories about like, I mean, Ape Canyon obviously is right there, but there's all sorts of devil references and things like that in the hills around there. And then so on our way to Mount St. Helens, you drive through Cougar, Washington, which is in the 70s. Robert W. Morgan, everything, all the research he was doing in that particular part of the country was out of that area. And, I don't think you realize until you're there and until you spend a lot of time doing research into it how old the history of Bigfoot sightings in that part of the country are. It goes way back before, the 70s, obviously, but there's so much lore surrounding it that when you factor in Ape Canyon and then you factor in all the sightings that happened in the 60s and 70s in that part of the country, it just builds such a case for these things being there. And that's the importance of something like Ape Canyon to me is it's like you're building a case for the creature's existence simply by documenting stories like Ape Canyon, because it's something that says, that this didn't just spring up, by these three drunken miners, which is what a lot of people a lot of people make it out to be. Like, these three guys were all drunk on moonshine and they got attacked by a rock slide. But the history of Bigfoot sightings near Ape Canyon goes back even before the Ape Canyon event, and it still is there today, which is interesting when you consider that Mount St. Helens erupted and at one point devastated a huge part of the landscape around there, including Ape Canyon itself. Ape Canyon was probably dramatically changed during the eruption.
So before I have you talk about some of the rewards that folks can get within the Kickstarter, I just wanted to say, in regards to the Kinderhook creature, it is much like Aaron and I's Dogman films, where it's tied into the companion book. Aaron's companion books tie directly into the films, and Bruce Hallenbach also has the Kinderhook creature book, which of course you guys, your STM Publishing, published. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that people can go look for that book as well.
Yeah, that's available on our website, Amazon, and I'm actually offering it as an add-on to the Kickstarter this year. So if you're backing it and you're like, oh, I want the book too, well, you don't have to go to another page. You can just add it right there, and then it'll be shipped with your first reward.
Oh, I might have to do that level. Okay, so that's a perfect segue. So let's talk about some of the reward levels and what folks can get.
So we have the films, of course, both digital, Blu-ray, or DVD format, whatever you prefer there. We also have...
Hold on. We got to say, because of the distribution issues we have had as a company over the last year, there are people that saw Lost Contact and Cryptid Goatman
2 months ago.
3 months ago.
And it'll be another
it'll
4
be,
months.
Yeah, 3 or 4 months before these movies are out. So if you're a Kickstarter backer, the window with which you get to view these movies
and get them physically.
Yeah, it's so far ahead of everyone else at this point that I think that's the biggest draw. That should be the biggest draw of the campaign, in my opinion, because it's like,
we send out the digital version the day we export the final version of the film.
Yeah.
So you get that immediately, and then it takes 3-4 weeks to print the DVDs. I usually ship those out within a week. And then it'll be months before they're available streaming, and I don't put them in our online store until they're streaming. So you get quite the lead up before anyone else even has the chance to look at them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's only been, it used to be different. It used to be that backers were basically getting stuff a few weeks before everyone else. Now it's like 3 to 6 months in advance.
But aside from the movies, we also have 2 t-shirts this year at different levels. We're doing a 10-year anniversary shirt and poster, which were illustrated by
Jonathan
Dodd.
Jonathan Dodd did the 10-year anniversary shirt, and then
we're doing a
Jeff
retro.
Jeff Coonsey did the retro 70s ringer tee, Minerva Monster ringer tee. It says 1978 on it. And it's like, Jeff did the original Minerva Monster poster, so it was kind of cool getting him back.
Jeff also did our individual movie posters for the year for the Kickstarter, which we're offering as an add-on because we realized a lot of people don't want a lot of posters. So it's kind of up to people if they want the additional posters on top of the 10-year poster or not. And a very exciting reward this year is Mr. Mark Matsky is writing our 10-year anniversary book. So it is A Decade of Monsters.
It's Making Monsters, A Decade of Small Town Monsters. I don't know if that's it or not.
It's
could be.
Similar to that, but he goes through the 10 years of STM, individual films, and he also has fans writing essays.
He picked 10 specific movies to talk about, and so it's not every movie we've made, but he did 10 chapters about 10 movies, and then there's an essay. There's like 10 essays as well from different people. Lauren Coleman wrote an essay.
Heather Arendice.
Yeah, there's a lot of... The cool thing is that like some of the essays are just written by STM fans, like people who are like who've been supporting us since 10 years ago. So that's kind of cool too. The statue? Did you mention
I
that?
haven't done the statue yet. We're doing another statue by Jean St. Jean, and this year we are returning to Dogman. It's been quite a while since we've done a Dogman statue, so we're going back there. Jean is actually submitting a sketch to me, hopefully today, so we're going to get an idea of what he's thinking about for what he's going to look like and his positioning and everything. And then our art print this year to celebrate 10 years of Minerva Monster is a canvas print of the Jeff Koonsey original Minerva Monster poster.
I love me a Jean St. Jean statue. Do you guys give him, okay, we want it kind of this color and in kind of this position, or you just let him run with it?
No, yeah, I just let him run with it. And the only thing we went back and forth on this year was which cryptid we were going to do, but he's only done one Dogman with us, and that was all the way back in 2018, so I thought we were about due for a new one. So he's doing, yeah, and I mean, you can kind of let Gene run wild because he's a genius at what he does, and he's very thorough, like super detailed. His work is so detailed, and I've got stuff of Gene's outside of the cryptid world. Like I've got a Batman statue downstairs that he did for DC Direct. But yeah, his stuff's amazing.
Yeah, I've got his Yeti, and that's all I've got, and that's just heresy. I need to get more of his statues. They are incredible, and I've had it for years. Thing hasn't budged off of its stand or anything. It's really well made, so I will say that. Well, guys, if you want to plug the Tube of the U, all the socials, the website, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if people visit the YouTube channel, they can hit subscribe or whatever. A lot of the episodic stuff we've been releasing on YouTube is starting to become available on other platforms now. So you can look up Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, Mountain State Monsters, The Ridge. A lot of that episodic stuff is now available on Tubi. That includes On the Trail of UFOs starring Shannon LeGros. Those are available on Tubi, Amazon, and other platforms like that, and that will continue to roll out across multiple platforms
On the
through
Trail
the year.
UFOs is about to be on Roku. We just heard coming soon.
Yeah, so that's the episodic stuff. The films are kind of all over the place right now, but you can still find most of the catalog on Amazon or Tubi. And then smalltownmonsters.com is usually the best place to keep up with us. The Kickstarter has a pre-launch page where you can go and click follow, I believe it is.
Yeah. If you want to keep up on anything with Small Town Monsters in general, Heather writes our newsletter, goes out weekly, and she always puts the newest, most exciting, and best of everything in there. So subscribing to the newsletter or following us on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook's going to get you the most recent news, including when we do things like restock the shop or put new stuff in the shop, because Zach Palmisano, our director of photography / graphic designer, is always coming up with new designs, and he just recently did a really cool throwback AOL Instant Messenger design that's in there. So anything new, you're always going to see first on socials or the newsletter.
Well, thank you guys for coming on for the update, and I look forward to seeing the different pledge levels that kick off on February 6th. And so I always say when I'm posting, go to Kickstarter, search Small Town Monsters. I mean, is that the easiest way to do that for folks?
It's going to be the easiest way. It's either that or like if they're on our Facebook page, they can click the links. But otherwise, it's just just search Small Town Monsters 2025.
Oh, and speaking of February 6th, at 6:50 p.m., we're actually doing a live launch party where the crew's getting together and we're talking, the last 10 years of STM. We're doing trivia. We're giving away prizes, showing trailers and clips that haven't been seen before. Crying. So if you want to be part of that and maybe win something from Mark Matsky Trivia Time, just check us out on Facebook or YouTube. We'll be live, and
Twitter
and giving away prizes and just having a good time in general.
So people that are watching are going to be answering the trivia questions?
Yeah.
Yep. Aaron, our host with the most, will be helping facilitate all that. And we have, I believe, 10 questions where we're giving away 10, honestly, historical prizes for STM, because when people move and they can't get their packages, they come back to me. So I'm giving away old packages that have t-shirts, movies, posters from previous Kickstarters. So to celebrate 10 years, we're giving away old Kickstarter prizes.
Which is cool because it's not like, I mean, once those are gone, they're gone, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so
literally the only way you can get them.
that I like that idea, the trivia. Very nice. I wonder what Aaron's come up with for that. I might have to poke him and get the questions ahead of time to see how
It's
difficult
Mark
they
that
are.
wrote the trivia, and Mark does not
Oh.
go easy on his trivia questions, so
Oh,
come prepared. He writes them
gosh.
hard.
Oh, Mark's doing it? Yeah, never mind. Good luck, everyone. And I wanted to say to Heather, my lovely friend, that I'm so sorry that she wasn't a part of this more, but her device is slightly resistant to this conversation today. So maybe it's, you know, just the orbs and the things around that are just not allowing her to speak more. I did not mean to leave her out of this conversation so much because she is a wealth of information. But thank you guys so much for joining me once again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Shannon.